Welcome, people. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to the official launch of the Power Awareness tool. And we're very excited to have you at this very special moment of introducing this tool to you after a lot of work that we've been putting into developing this tool as Partos, but also in collaboration with many people. And I'm realizing that we're actually running the final miles of this year. We're at the entrance of our holiday seasons, and actually, we're about to give you a little present for the holiday season. And this gift that we're presenting to you is our Power Awareness tool. And you can consider this as our hopes and wishes for the sector, for global uh, or international cooperation and global civil society. And this wish really stems from an idea or basically a movement that has been pushing for more equitable relationships in the way that international uh, cooperation is being laid out. A call for more Southern leadership, but also more equitable representation in how decisions are made and who is actually taking part in what way. And the power awareness tool really sits at one of those initial thoughts on how we actually have conversations on power and being aware if you want to shift power, where do you actually start? What are ways in which we can understand the process of decision making? Um, so today we will dive more into what that actually means, and you can consider this as a unboxing session, a live unboxing session in which we will unwrap the different elements of the power awareness tool, its purpose, but also the reflections and discussions that we've been having. And I won't do that alone. I will be joined by a number of people that will also give some reflections. Some people that were in the initial phase of developing the power awareness tool. Other are co-investors that have been investing in the development of this tool. And we will also have a panel discussion later on with a couple of very interesting speakers that will share more on their perspectives on how are we currently working towards more equitable partnerships. Important to mention that there are a couple of organizations that made the development of this power awareness tool available. Obviously, Partos has been convening them, but just to mention them, they're also visible on the screen. That's Cordate, Wilde Ganse, ACFO, Word en Daad, Oxfam Novib, and Liliane Fund. And ACFO has been the developing partner on this end. Um, just as a check, you're able to see my screen, right? Can I see some thumbs up? Yep. All right. Wonderful. In the meantime, I'm also inviting you to be present in whichever way you would like to be. That can be either through using the emoticons to give like a thumbs up or any response, but also using the chat for any questions or reactions. So we can have a lively discussion together. Um, and give a little bit of a sneak peek on what to expect today. So we will have a little bit more on the about of the Power Awareness tool. So how has it been developed? We will have a demonstration of what this new digital version of the tool actually looks like. Maybe I forgot to mention it, but the Power Awareness tool was already developed as an offline version, an Excel-based version. And in this new version, we are actually offering a web-based digitalized version that can, well, process the different steps in a very easy to use manner. And then we will follow it up with a panel discussion. But before we move into that discussion, I'd like to bring you on a little adventure. And the image that you see right here might be depicting your road to power awareness, your road to making power and equity and power in decision making more visible. And I was wondering if you imagine yourself being somewhere on that journey, where would that be? Would that be somewhere on the summit? Would you be flying over, having the overview, or do you feel like you're, for example, somewhere amidst fire or drowning in a river? I'm just curious to see where you would be standing. And if you would look at the lower left corner, there's this button that allows you to make annotations. If you click on it, you can actually start drawing. So you're invited to participate and basically situate yourself somewhere along this journey. Okay, maybe I can invite someone from the audience to share a reflection on where they position themselves. Is there someone who would like to unmute and speak up? I can't see hands, so maybe you can just unmute yourself.
I'm not sure I was able to work with this tool. I tried to put myself on the plane, having a kind of overlooking on the whole panorama, let's say, of this power awareness tool. So
All right.
still looking from a certain distance, but trying also to have an overall picture.
Okay, so trying to have an overview. All right, all right. Nice. Thank you for sharing your reflection.
Yeah.
Um, and that having said, we're gonna move on to the next section, and we make a little mind map on and also are aware that there are some people that might feel comfortable in this journey, but others that might feel like they're drowning, hit by lightning, or maybe lost in the wood fires. Um, so moving on, I would like to invite our one of the other speakers, the next speakers that has been playing a very important role in the early development of the power awareness tool. Willem Albers from the Radboud University, who is someone who has been doing a lot of research on power dynamics in partnerships. And Willem, together also with Heinz Grein, important to mention, who is also here, is one of the people that together with Partos and members developed a first version of the power awareness tool. And Willem, I would like to ask you if you can step forward to share a bit more about why this tool was developed in the first place and what methodology was introduced.
Yeah, thank you, Gigi. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing fine. Really happy to see so many faces. Also, quite a number of people who I know, so it's always nice. And thank you once again for having me here. Yeah, this has been a real journey for me personally, because this has been a topic that I've always worked on from academia and trying to make the bridge towards practice. Um, so when I was asked in 2019 to work on an idea of a power awareness tool, I was immediately psyched. It was Heinz, who is also here, Heinz Grein. He had been working on this idea as a kind of spin-off from from the Shift the Power Lab. And sort of the puzzle was, and maybe you can move to the next slide, Gigi. The puzzle was there is a lot of talk already about shifting power. We know that the aid system is inherently top-down. I think this is not something I need to explain. So we need to do something about it. And so what can you concretely do? And as Heinz already found out in a mapping exercise, there was not that much concretely in terms of a kind of methodology or a set of steps that you could follow. And that is maybe where also I came in. So we really worked together. And then, you know, shifting power, the word is power. Power is such a slippery concept. But we know from research, we know from experience that it works really well to bring it down to decision making. And yes, there are other aspects of power, for example, your personal power, your charisma. It's all true. But to make this work in an organizational setting, in a relational setting, decision-making power is really something where we can make it more concrete. And the idea is, if you go to a doctor, you can only solve the problem, the issue that you have, if you have a proper diagnosis. So it really starts with a kind of self-evaluative tool to look at yourself, but also at your relationship. So it is a kind of diagnosis ID and a kind of dialogue ID. Where are we? What is your perception on things? Maybe you can move to the next slide. So the whole idea of this tool was to enable a kind of structured dialogue, and that is easier said than done because we wanted this to be very concrete, very tangible. So we focused on the idea of decision-making topics. There are if you look at the power relationships, you know that one party probably has more ability to determine what are the boundaries, who can be involved in a relationship or program in the first place, what are the goals, the strategies. And when you boil this down to the essence, you are talking about decision-making power, decision-making ability. So it really helps if you define power in terms of the ability to influence decision-making outcomes. This is not the end all. This is one way to do it, and it's a very tangible way. So then if you have a structured discussion with each other about what are then the most important decision-making topics, realizing that these change over time. And we know from research that, for example, at the beginning of a relationship, the more important decisions are made. Very often, key decisions are already made, and then partners are invited. So power becomes a kind of invisible, but it is there because those who join later are confronted with non-negotiables or facts. Can you break this open? And then you can really have an open discussion. Maybe you can go to the next slide, Gigi. So the idea then is let's say you identify a number of key topics that both parties, or if you are in a bigger group, all parties at least feel are important, then you can have a structured discussion and you've used a kind of decision-making ladder. And this is the one that we used in the tool. You can see how you look at yourself and the other, and you will probably find out that was some of the things, because Heinz and I and another colleague, we evaluated the use of the power awareness tool. We found out, for example, that perceptions tend to differ. Maybe one party thinks they are not that powerful, they give a lot of space, but the other one might feel very differently. So having that clarity, having that open discussion is really helpful. And yes, you can assign a rating, a number to different scores. So you can score, you can give a 1, 2, 3. You see the ladder. And when you discuss different topics, that gives a certain more hard-ish impression of the power equality or inequality. And that is useful because it's a kind of snapshot in time, but it's actually the process, which is probably most important, that it enables a kind of open dialogue, that you have this discussion. And yes, it is exciting. You must create a safe space. This is about real organization realities, about survival also. So having that facilitation is really key, and having a genuine desire to shift power or to localize whatever phrasing that you're using is key. Because if you start and you're not really serious, then you are creating expectations you're not living up to. So to sum up, this is a process where you focus on decision-making power, you make the topics concrete, you discuss with each other the relative influence of each other, and you discuss the desired vis-a-vis the actual influence. And then you can really move forward and create a kind of roadmap for the future. And then maybe in 1 or 2 years' time, you can repeat and you see where we are. So it's also a kind of, in Dutch, we have a way of annual car check, right? You check the health of your car. This is a kind of check where you can check the health of the power dynamics in your relationship. And I hope that makes it clear to you and that you are really also interested in having that check, maybe just as you would check your car. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A nice way to describe that you're checking the health of power dynamics in your partnerships. Yeah, yeah. So everybody is encouraged to do a health checkup as soon as possible. But thanks for these reflections, Willem, and we might come back later to you with some questions. But for now, I would like to invite or another organization that has actually used the power awareness tool previously in a partnership. And may I invite Marije Nederveen from Oxfam Novib? You've used the power awareness tool in a specific case, right? Can you explain a little bit more on
Yeah,
what,
actually,
how, why?
thank you, Gigi, and very nice to be here. And thank you for the invitation also to join in the conversation. So yes, Oxfam Novib has, I think, in different strands tried to work with the tool. But just to give you a very specific case that I was involved in the first time I got into contact, which was during the development actually, where we had the team of our Somalia office working on a partnership strategy. And for them to better understand basically how their decision making was taking place with regards to their partners, I did an exercise then for example, with all the staff also of our office there, saying like, actually, if you reflect on your project, who takes which decision and when, or which decision has been made, because it was also on many ongoing projects. And it was really nice to see that you see people doing the exercise and they're reflecting and they're thinking, oh, yes, maybe actually we do take the majority of the decisions, and maybe there is a need for us to change. And it's just this little light bulb that switches on. I've also done it with colleagues in my office, for example, just with my own team, and it has a similar effect. So yeah, I think it really helps you to think through actually how many decisions do we take responsibility for. I think that's also part of it. But then maybe we should change that had that feeling of needing to take responsibility for everything.
Thank you. That's a very nice introspection as a pros or a result of using the power awareness tool. Lori Cajegas from Wilde Gansen. I wanted to ask you a bit of a similar question, but also as Wilde Gansen, who has been one of the co-investors, why have you or your organization decided to invest then in a new version of the tool? And why do you think it's important to invest in this, the need for power awareness?
Thanks, G. And good to meet everyone in this launching. I'm Lori. I'm the program coordinator and lobbyist of Wilde Gansen. Wilde Gansen is quite an institution in the Netherlands. We've been supporting local organizations directly since the 70s. And we believe that, having a tool like the Power Awareness tool could help us in our ambition to take steps on how we shift power, because we do need to look at ways where, for example, the private development initiatives that we are supporting here in the Netherlands and Belgium, we have like 240 of them. This is a mix of a group of individuals, family foundations, small foundations, medium foundations who are supporting and fundraising for different development initiatives in local communities in the 50 countries where we provide small and medium grants. And we believe that through this practical tool, we could take steps from having an awareness to really have a dialogue together with the PDIs, through convenings, through workshops, and making them more aware not only on the power dynamics, but also the harm that power dynamics in a partnership could also put in a relationships with local organization. So we do convenings with our PDIs on equitable partnerships, and I think the questions and also the focus on decision making power and who holds the power and how we could shift it. The Excel version, the questions on that tool already help in having a more structured discussion. And through those convenings, Wilde Gansen was also sort of encouraged to pilot participatory grant making in Egypt, Tanzania, where else? Ethiopia, and if I may be wrong, also Tunisia. Oh, there are 4 countries that also encourages us to address this power dynamics. So through the participatory grant making, the role of the local organizations has shifted to become facilitators of, on how they would encourage discussions within the communities and also identify an intersection of representatives of this community advisory group to discuss and identify not only needs but also opportunities that they want to address together in the communities, and decides themselves on the amount of funding that they need, and they themselves also deliver these development initiatives in the communities, and having a feeling that they become a co-investors development rather than just receiving funding from a local organization. And through that, it also signals the importance of being, an actors of change, a co-investors of change, through having this decision-making power, that they could have a sense of control on how they would drive their own development. And we do plan to also use the power awareness tool in the partnership review that we're currently designing for the Giving for Change Alliance, to think around how we could move forward, not in a formal partnership per se, but also looking at how movement building process and the kind of decision making that entails to move forward, even without a funding, for example. That's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Laurie. I think those examples really explore or demonstrate how the tool can be used in various settings. So not only in the initial phase of understanding how you would like to work together, but also as a monitoring and reflection tool that you can look or use to look back at your partnership and how it has been experienced. We've also heard of examples of using the power awareness tool as sort of baseline and then repeating that, in various moments, which then gives a very nice overview, sometimes confronting, but also to the better that you can see the progress that has been made in creating more equitable partnerships over time. Thank you for those short introductions. We will now move on to the demonstration of the tool, for which I would like to invite Ines from ACFO. ACFO is our implementing partner, but also the developing partner of the Power Awareness tool. Ines,
Yes.
take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Ines. I led the development of the Power Awareness tool from ACFO's side. As ACFO, we were very happy when we were asked for this assignment, because the topic of power awareness is also something that we try to be conscious about in our projects, but also in partnerships we are part of. So very happy with this. Before we dive into the actual tool, there is just a quick slide to show why we actually did this, the development of a digital version. Because as Gigi said, this tool was already existing in an Excel file and also a guiding document. But of course, when you digitize the tool, it brings a lot of opportunities and additional features apart from the content, which we did not change in this round. But when you have a digital version, the possibility of session management is a feature that is additional. So people can, within their account, create sessions, save them, always revisit them, which is very helpful. Also, there is an increased interaction in this digital environment, so people can be invited to a particular session and also contribute in an interactive way, like give a bit of feedback on the session. We combined all the guidance documents we have for facilitators and users, so there's a lot of tips around that are very helpful when you are facilitating this session. We also added an automatic reporting feature so that you have a digital environment where you can do the assessment, but you can always download a PDF from this that can be shared through email or different platforms. We also added a new language, so now you can also facilitate these sessions in French. And for more on the Partos side, there is more user insights now, so we can know which organizations are using this, for what purposes they do it, and this allows, especially in the future when many people will use this tool, allows for having more insights and data-driven insights on power relationships within partnerships, so that can be very interesting in the future. And lastly, because it's a digital platform, we also integrated it with other power resources. So you can always visit this tool, not only for facilitating a session, but also to see different resources on power awareness. So I think I've said most, and we can continue to the tool itself. I will share my screen. Oh, sorry, I think there is an issue. I will have to quickly go out of this session and come in again. I'm sorry.
And let's use this moment for people to post their questions in the chat if there are any questions or comments or any clarifications needed. Feel free to share them in the chat. And with this little technical hiccup, we'll see Ines hopefully soon. So as an answer to the first question, is the tool available to anyone and is it public? Yes, this version is currently available for everybody and it's free to use. In future iterations, we might consider to include a paywall construction, but that would still allow a very basic option for people to still use the tool, but then you wouldn't have all the additional features to create an X amount or like plural sessions. But Ines will explain more.
Sorry for this. I have a new laptop and I needed to allow some settings. But let's continue. So here, I hope everyone sees my screen properly. Yeah. We are at a landing page of the Power Awareness tool, which already gives some additional information about this. And as you can see, you can log in. Always, everyone, like Gigi just mentioned, can make an account. But I already have an account, so I will log in this way. Once you log in, you arrive at your dashboard where you can see your active sessions, closed sessions, and as you can see, also some other key things. So like we mentioned, there is a resources page that links you to other resources. There are the frequently asked questions with the, all information that you need to use this tool. You can set the language to French. And now I want to very briefly show you how you do this, like facilitate the session. We don't have much time, so...
Ines, could you make your presentation full screen? It's a bit small.
It's small?
Yeah, it's not showing the full screen. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to switch to another screen later on. So is this bigger?
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now in this use case, I will be the facilitator of a new PAT session. So I simply create a new one by clicking a new PAT session. Let's imagine there is a climate resilience watch program that we have a partnership on that is in Uganda, but also in the United States of America are included, and the Netherlands. I will quickly select this date. Here you can say why you are doing this session. That's important or interesting data for Partos. Let's say that ACFO is part of this. You can also choose an acronym. Maybe it's USAID who is funding. To be clear, this is just a very non-existing example, of course. And there is this name that I made up, a local company in Uganda that is helping with the implementation. You can also add some context information on this partnership, and then you can save the session. Next, you get information that you can share with all the participants of this session. You have a button for that. That's like when you are sharing a Zoom link. It's very similar with a code. So I will now briefly show you how it works. Imagine you are someone else. So this screen is from, like you see on the bottom, Sarah. And Sarah is also part of the partnership and wants to join the session. So she can, through the button of join a session, join the session, fill in the code that she has received from me as a facilitator. And then she it's possible for her to say which organization of this partnership she's part of. Maybe she's from USAID and she is the project manager, but this is a free field. You can just explain what your role is. And then she arrives in the session also. Sarah, as a participant, is not able to edit any details because that is responsibility from the facilitator. So I now go back to my own profile where I'm the facilitator of this active session, which I can open. And then, as you can see on the left, we have the different steps of the Power Awareness tool that we can start filling in. So maybe as a very quick example, one activity could be, or one decision can be the priority of activities, maybe also budgets, decisions, and maybe when the partnership has to end, as a quick example. So we go to, further with these three decisions. Here you see again the ladder of decision making. So we will fill in the current situation of how decision making is being done by these partners in the partnership. This I'm just very quickly going to click through it. But of course, this will take a lot of time when you're having the actual discussion. If as a facilitator, I'm a bit confused on how to do this, we have help buttons where you get additional information. So I'm going to click through. The next step is to say whether you agree with these decisions, the degree of decision-making power for the decisions, and indicate that in the table. And then as you see, for the ones that the group did not agree on, the discussion continues, and the group will have to decide on what is then the best decision-making power for each partner. So once that is decided, we will write down what the concrete actions are to arrive at this new situation. I'm just filling in concrete action now to be quick. And then at the end, the facilitator has the opportunity to fill in some additional information on this session. I'm quickly going to show you for Sarah, who is a participant. She is, if we will have to reload, seeing the things that the facilitator has filled in, but she can't edit. However, at the end, she also has had the opportunity to say something about this session. Maybe she wants to add comment that is something she did not agree on, or like we want to allow every participant to say something. So that's done in this way. And then as a facilitator, I can decide that the session is done after the workshop or the different meetings that were needed, and publish the session. I get a final last overview of what we have done. And I also have to check this box because after publishing, there is no possibility to add this session anymore. So it will become closed for everyone. And as you see, there are no active sessions anymore, only this closed one, where you can revisit, you see the information and you can revisit what was done and download a report. In this report, all necessary information is in there. So the participants, who had which role, and all the different steps with some additional information on what exactly happened. And also at the end, we added the comments from each participant. I think that's like very quick and very high level what this tool, how you can facilitate sessions in this tool. So I leave it to this. I don't know if there are questions for me or for more on the content side of this.
I did see a couple of questions in the chat, and for those interested, Aleda just shared the link for the Power Awareness tool below, so you can use that as well. But there was one specific question on the level of data privacy and what information Partos uses and like what we can actually see. Maybe it's nice to show the statistics page, which is basically what we can see as Partos.
Yeah, so maybe to elaborate on that, of course, you are dealing with some sensitive information here. So we will never, like Partos does not have the opportunity to go into different profiles and see the details of the sessions. The only thing Partos can see is who is like purely the users, but maybe I can briefly show that is a name, a country, and an email address. That's also for when you want to be deleted from the system, we need to allow for that. And on the statistics side, it's very high level, the amount of sessions that are completed over the last 30 days, so we can see if it's active at the moment or not. And we also have a small graph on the purpose of why you are creating a session. So that gives some high level information on why people are using the tool.
Thank you, Ines. Let me see then. There was another question with regards to facilitation of the session. If it's only online, do you recommend to have the reflection facilitated by someone from outside your organization, or can you self-facilitate?
Yeah, maybe that's a question for you, Gigi or Heinz, on the exact way of facilitating this.
Yeah, I could answer this. So what we do recommend people or users of the Power Awareness tool is to work with an external facilitator to guide the different participants through the session. This is also included in our frequently asked questions. The reason for that is like through previous use of the case, we learned that the external presence of a facilitator really takes away a lot of power dynamics already. So imagine that, for example, you're a Northern INGO and you're facilitating a discussion around power dynamics that already puts in place some barriers, for example, for people to speak up. So in order to basically counter that from the beginning, or to create awareness on those power dynamics, we do advise you to work with facilitators that are able to guide this externally. We are at the moment also trying to sort of create a pool or overview of different facilitators that have used the Power Awareness tool before and might want to use this in the future. So Partos might be one of the brokers that can connect different external facilitators with the people that want to use the tool. Yeah. Then I see a hands up from MDF. Alef and Chloe, yes.
Hi. Hi. I was just wondering, for the agree option, is it that the participants say that they agree that that's the state of power as it is now, or as it should be? Like, is it more of an observation or a wish, basically?
So you mean the third step, right? Where in the list of decisions and the current state of decision-making power, whether the group agrees or not?
Yeah. So it's just, what does that agree mean?
So it says in the text, it basically, if everyone is agreeing, then it's agree. But once one person in the group is not agreeing, it means that this decision needs to be investigated further. And there needs to be an additional discussion on until there is an alignment within the group. But yeah, Hans, please.
Sorry, it doesn't answer my question. So basically, if if this is the portrait that we have, and I think that indeed Akvo co-decides, but I think Akvo should just be informed. So if I agree that this is the current state of things, should I click on agree? Or if I think that, yes, it is the current state of things, but I don't think it should remain this way, do I put disagree? I don't know if you understand.
Yeah, can I maybe clarify this? It's actually in the text on this slide. I mean, the key question here is, do we agree with the way partner organizations are involved in taking these type of decisions? So if if everybody agrees that this is okay with us, that for example, if you look at priority of activities, the decision about that ACFO decides or co-decides that USAID is not even informed and that the Ugandan organization is being consulted. But if we agree on that, then there's no problem. You don't need, then this is the the way this decision has been taken hasn't caused any friction. Everybody agrees that this has been the right way of doing it. So that is what agree means, the way these decisions have been taken. And if you disagree with the way these decisions have been taken, then you say that you don't agree. And then you need to discuss, how should we take these kind of decisions the next time? Does that clarify your question?
A little bit, yes. But then, okay.
So it's not about the decision itself, it's about the way decisions are being taken.
Okay. We have room for one more question. I saw some questions in the chat, but maybe someone can just raise their hand and unmute. Okay. If not, then we will move on to the next part. Thank you so much for demonstrating, Ines, and Heinz also for giving some clarifying answers. There was one, okay, I do see that there is a bit of extra reflection needed on let me just rephrase. When people agree yes or no, is the agreement about the reality or accuracy of the rating? Do I consider this as true? Or is it something you're comfortable with the results of rating, and if there's none, should there be adjustment, for example? I think this accounts for the same question around what is the meaning of the agreeing yes or no. So agreement on the decision-making levels. And I think I'm going to try to explain again, but what Heinz mentioned is that, so for example, there's a topic on funding, so decision-making in how funding is distributed. And as one of the partner organizations, your current level of involvement is actually very low. And reflecting on those differences, you would reflect on the fact that, well, perhaps there needs to be a change because we disagree with the fact that we don't have any decision-making role in this state. And based on that, you would say either agree or disagree. And based on that, you can then move on to defining then the desired level of participation. So it's really about reflecting if you agree with the way decisions are being made, and if you agree with the degree of participation in decision making. Hopefully that clarifies. If not, you're always welcome to send us an email with other questions to clarify that more. Yes. Looking at the time, and I know that there are so many other questions to answer, but maybe we can cover some of those also in part of the discussion that we will have. I would like to move on to the panel discussion that we also have planned for today. I'm trying to work with my screen. Apologies. This panel discussion is my apologies. So the panel discussion is together with a couple of other people active in the field of international cooperation, of which two are representing Dutch NGOs, but we also have our guest from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mariska van Beenem, who is currently the strategic coordinator for localization and adaptation. And we will also be joined by Marije Nederveen from Oxfam Novib and Wilde Ganse, Lori Cajigas, who was here before as well. Welcome, everybody. I would like to start with Mariska, and to give a little bit of an overview, the purpose of this panel discussion is also to basically do a temperature check with where we're standing in our efforts to shift power and to localize at the moment. And important to state is that obviously within the Dutch international civil society and partnerships, we also know that there have been budget cuts announced and that there will be changes. And our priorities at the moment for the sector are also about, well, ensuring that there will be continuous funding for Dutch INGOs, but at the same time, that also raises a critical question on how we look at our own stakes, but also in relation to the localization agenda and shifting power. So how can we actually continuously put our efforts and our commitment for more equitable partnerships at the center of these discussions? It also asks us the question, how does the ministry actually look at these developments? But before we enter into that discussion, I would like to ask Mariska to invite to introduce herself and explain a little bit more about your role. So what does it mean? Coordinator for localization and adaptation. And what does the MFA do to promote power awareness within the MFA?
Yes, thank you so much. Just to check, because I had some issues, but I think you can hear me.
Yeah.
Correct? Yes. No, thank you so much, and thanks for the invitation and for the presentation already. It's very timely and exciting, but we'll get to that in a minute. So my role, and thank you for stating that beautiful title. For the sake of transparency, I came up with that title myself. And that maybe underlines already a little bit. So I used to work for the Klingendahl Institute. I was the director of the Conflict Research Unit. And I am now working on a 2-year assignment, if you will, for the Director General for International Cooperation. But I'm housed at the Department for Stability and Humanitarian Assistance to help the MFA put into practice those two terms that we've used for many years: locally led ownership, et cetera, and adaptive programming. And what does that actually mean in practice, and what is it that we can do? There's already, I think, a lot happening at the more, let's say, technical level in the various thematic departments. So again, I work for the Department for Stability and Humanitarian Aid. We've had some recent calls for proposals where localization in very different forms has been one of the central elements of the request for proposals. What, from my perspective, is interesting, I think the MFA is very much aware of its power position, maybe now even more than ever, because of the developments that you just highlighted. What I also see is that there is a challenge in terms of balancing the different roles. So we say we want to be a partner to our partners, and at the same time, we also have to be a donor with certain accountability requirements and legal boundaries that we have to work within. And I see my colleagues struggling a little bit in terms of that maybe we see that on the basis of all the evaluations that we get, we actually, should maybe move some of those boundaries that are set internally. But it's challenging to convince everyone that that's the right thing to do. However, what I have learned working in my own role is that there is room for pushing those boundaries, but it requires continuous conversation, and it really requires a lot of effort. And I think this tool that was just presented actually is also an interesting one to maybe test on ourselves, if you will. What we are trying to do internally at the moment is really plant the seeds and work with everyone on unpacking what does equitable partnership mean. And we see that in part it has something to do with our own role, and in part it also has something to do with how we enable or hinder our partners to be a good equitable partner, because this is for me an important element in the fact that you have to be realistic about how far we as the ministry can take localization, as it's sometimes translated into more direct funding for local organizations, we are limited by the capacity that we have to manage contracts. And as a result, and it's going to be even more difficult in light of the budget cuts across the board in the Netherlands, so we will have less staff. And that means that we, for the bulk of our funding, we go through some sort of intermediary channel. What I see is that we are moving, on the one hand, in terms of thinking about who can act as an intermediary channel, where maybe traditionally it was sort of almost a knee-jerk reaction. It's going to be either UN entities or INGOs. And on the other hand, we see that we are moving in terms of what is our role to enable our intermediary partners to, as I said, be better at equitable partnership. So I could maybe give some examples of what that means, but I'm not sure if that's what is of interest. So I'm just going to pause to let you steer me.
You.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for those reflections. And I think there's a lot already that has been touched. It's interesting to hear that you're talking about the different roles and also the maybe contradictions or the challenges of having the role of both a partner and a donor. So one question I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned that, well, because that's such a challenge to have both that partner and donor role, there needs to be some type of intermediary role to play. And so far, that has always been fulfilled by Dutch INGOs or partnerships that take this role of mediating the funding from the Dutch MFA to whatever constituency or community or organization that is involved in this connection. I was wondering if you can share a bit more on then the view of the MFA and how these roles might be shifting in the future, and if this intermediary role will be less from INGOs, how will it be filled up?
So, as I said, I think on the one hand, what we see is that there's more effort made to think differently about who can act as an intermediary. So we have some examples of that were already in place. There was under the current supporting civil society framework leading from the South, for instance, where it was a set of fund managers. They called themselves women organizations who were transferring the funds in one of the sets of partnerships that I am working with. We really push to have a network organization in the mix. We just had a call for proposals on migration and displacement that specifically asked for what they called support partners to put forward proposals that really emphasized how they were going to basically pass through money to, in this case, refugee-led organizations, with an emphasis on how are they going to fulfill that role as a pass-through mechanism, if you will. And I think that's also where we are increasingly now focusing our attention, because if you break it down in two simple terms, you can basically say localization on the one hand has a lot to do with many of the things that are also in the tool that has to do with inclusion, inclusive decision making, inclusion in terms of implementation, design, etc., etc. And then there's the equitable partnership part that is more linked to subcontracting, subgranting, etc., etc., where there's more of a business type of relationship, if you will. And from our perspective, this is where we have some sort of control and also a responsibility, right? We have a say about how our money is being spent. And so the conversations that I'm having at the moment with our partners at DSH have to do with how do you pass through the money that we are giving to you. We give certain contractual obligations for sure, but also certain room to maneuver. So we were very lucky and very proud of that, but also very happy that we managed to pull that through before the new government came into place. But in this specific case, we have 8-year contracts. So then the question is to our partners, are you also signing multi-annual contracts with your partners? Or does your compliance, your internal compliance procedures not allow you to do that? And what we are finding is that very often that's not possible because of the own internal rules and regulations. The legal people from our partners are not allowing this, etc., etc. The same when it comes to, we give 15% overhead. How much of that is passed through, and how much of that is staying in the bank account of the intermediary, and for what reason? Risk sharing is another one. So there are different sort of elements that we are now discussing with our partners to also understand why or why not they pass through some of these elements, right? Because a lot of that has to do also with our own rules and regulations, and that's important information for us to have to be better in terms of how we can be a partner for our partners. If you can still follow my my logic.
Yeah.
So we're sort of in a joint learning process, if you will, which will hopefully turn into something that I'm working on, which is, for lack of a better word, I'm still calling it a guidance, but really sort of unpacking what are the different elements of equitable partnership, what does it mean for our role, and what are the things that we could and should discuss with our partners, to also think about what of these elements can we take into account in future calls for proposals.
Thank you. So that's clear. Maybe to wrap that up is the focus on both the business but also the operational and technical requirements from the MFA that can also be adapted or loosened to make partnerships more flowing, to be honest, and more inclusive and equitable in the
Exactly.
experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's invite also the other two speakers, Lori and Marija, who both could give a perspective from the INGO, the INGO perspective. Maybe to start with, Lori, and this can also both be in reply to what you've just heard from Mariska, but I'm wondering if you can share a bit more on where your organization started in the journey to shift power, and if you recognize some of the challenges that Mariska just explained in working together in partnerships.
Thanks, Gigi. Thanks, Mariska, for your introduction and sharing a bit on the thinking and examples on how you would be supporting locally led development. For Wilde Hansen, I think what I will be sharing with you is a critic on the current development model that hinges on the sort of inequitable power with the power centering around donors in the north and also the receiving end of the aid chain. So as I've mentioned earlier, Bulgagas has been supporting directly local organizations for decades now. And what we've observed is that when local organizations became more and more dependent on foreign funding, it also becomes a threat to their own existence. So we have observed organizations having less control on how they set priorities, and their priority change when local NGOs come and go in the communities, and most of the local organizations will also become conditioned on how aid has been channeled, that that they become passive recipients rather than co-investors in their own development. And we also know that the availability of funding, and also especially foreign funding, and the conditionalities that are tied to that has threatened the existence of those local organizations. Some of them we've observed, they just closed down. They stopped working because of this conditionality that has been passed on. And of course, with the dependency of foreign funding, there's a vulnerability for local organization to be attacked, or the civic space shrinking in some of the contexts that we've been operating. So with this on the backdrop, we realize as Volta starting early 2000, we've shifted our strategy and really focused on the importance of promoting the self-reliance, especially of local organizations and local communities. And mobilizing local resources has become key to our strategy in supporting local organizations. So we're not INGO. We are mostly, a funder, a grant maker, more than implementing directly. So that's the difference with some INGOs. And so how we do this, we have a program called Change the Game Academy, which is an alliance of 19 local and national organizations present in 17 countries worldwide. And that alliance promotes local resource mobilization, not only financial local resource mobilization, but also encouraging communities to promote constituency building, to mobilize support, may it be in terms of networks, knowledge, influence of people in their communities or stakeholders in communities, and mobilize them to also be encouraged to co-invest in development initiatives that are happening in their own communities. And we've observed that the diversity of these local resources also contributes to promoting local ownership. And with local money, there's local power, local solutions that are made more available, and people having confidence that they could really drive their own development process. And of course, foreign funding could sort of, support that process. But the continuing dependency on foreign funding, we felt that there should be another way of doing development. And that has also led to the creation of the Giving for Change Alliance, which advances community philanthropy across the world. We believe that all communities have assets, may it be not only financial, but also local knowledge, expertise, networks, and influence. And when that is pooled together, that it unlocks and also builds a local community power and voice, and enables people in the community to be co-investors in their own development. And we do believe that with the ODA declining, we've seen it. People have different feelings about it, but as Vildegansen, we feel that it's also give impulse to the much needed reform in the aid system, and that hopefully that would also recognize the importance of emergent models and practices that really shift away from this dependence on foreign funding, but really centers the voice and power and decision making role of local communities as drivers of their own development. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie, for bringing in that point around dependency and community philanthropy as an alternative to, the donor dependencies that are still present in the sector. Oxfam Novib, Maria, is well known as quite a large INGO. How have you or your organization been working on creating them more equitable partnerships or dealing with shifting power?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it brief, considering the time. But basically, Oxfam Novib is part of the larger confederation of Oxfam, and within that confederation, we've had for a longer time already the discussion on how do we actually also decolonize our own organization, and how do we work on localization within all the different Oxfams that are there, starting probably with real commitments coming when we signed up to the Pledge for Change from 2021 onwards. And that resulted within Oxfam Novib in a process which we now call the Authentic Partnership Vision and Action Plan. We've developed basically a new vision on how we would like to do our partnerships, and we speak now about authentic partnerships, which includes 6 shifts that we want to make as an organization. And I saw in the chat that there is areas of change that Liliana Font committed to, but we also have our similar areas of change, I would say, that we would like to work on. So just to say, we have a shift called, which is familiar, I think, to many, but from trust to vulnerability, from compliance and control to trust and vulnerability, for example. Another one is from being right to doing what's right. And then also from resources that follow, or partnerships that follow resources to resources that follow partnerships, just to give some examples. And all of these are ways to set off ideas, experiments within the organization, basically, in our ways of working on how can we realize our authentic partnership practice. Just to give one concrete example, we're working towards new ways of. We are also funding many other organizations through our funding that we receive from other donors. But whereas before we were set up as an organization for large-scale grants, which we still can, we're now thinking like, how can we change and shift the models that we're working on? So besides thinking through, can partners lead actually the grants that we're applying through, who can take the leadership in the consortia that we're setting up, for example, to also thinking through how can we actually facilitate small grants, small grant making, which is a different type of activity than what we're used to, which sets up for all kinds of challenges, but I can talk about that maybe more in a minute. I think I'll leave it at that, as there's much more to say, but.
Thank you. Then a follow-up question to I think both of you, because you both mentioned ways in which your organizations have been trying to address power dynamics and work towards localization, decolonization. What would you say are currently one of the bigger dilemmas, the bigger challenges that are actually obstructing your road to making changes, actually long-lasting changes? And perhaps, and I'm not sure, and I'm also aware that we haven't invited any partner organizations in the room, but perhaps you can share something that has been given back from your partner organizations on what type of change is needed. Like, if there's one thing that your organization should change, what do partners indicate?
Yeah, if I may respond, we had last week an interesting meeting where we had invited partners from Myanmar, for example, and they spoke. And one of the things that they really said, like, we need to really live this paradigm shift of putting partners at the center of development. So to really think through how can we create tailor-made approaches for our partners to really do their work well, instead of setting the priorities from here and coming up with an agenda that they have to follow. I think that was also mentioned by Laurie. Had this kind of this creation of a passive relationship. We'll just have to follow your priorities because then we'll get the funding, but really to see how can we center the work around what our partners are doing. I think that was a message that came through very clearly to us. And maybe in addition, I think, and this is more of a self-reflection that comes also through the shifts, like from compliance and control to trust and vulnerability, but to really think through what does it mean to build trust and what are the assumptions that are in many cases made when we do our compliance. Why do we actually ask the questions that we do in terms of our compliance? What is the expectation of our partners there? And unfortunately, like also one of the messages that we got from the partners from Myanmar was saying, like, yes, we're constantly questioned on our abilities. We're constantly questioned on who we are, what we do, and we're undermined in showing what we are really capable of through these questions. And I think that is something that we really need to pay attention to.
Thank you. And I do hear a resemblance in what has been shared by Mariska, that these are also some of the compliance and like more operational questions that might inhibit truthful and meaningful, authentic partnerships. Laurie, from your end, what are the major challenges that your organization should tackle well?
Well, I think the issue on compliance and taking risks, and to the extent that you could take risk as a funder or as an organization, it really entails changing mindsets within the organization itself, and also recognizing, because Wildegansen has been supporting local organizations directly for long time, decades. So that long-term relationship, although for small grants, also build this trusting relationship. So the issue of compliance, if you look at, for example, you've been supporting that organization for 10 years and you're asking the same thing, I think that's something wrong around that. So maybe you could look at ways where we also have very difficult discussions within our financial department, on to the extent that you could also loosen up, if, for example, there's a donor like the MFA has this flexibility, then we could also look at the ways where our compliance requirements could be also more flexible, and we could really build on on the basis that we do have trust-based relationship already, including with alliance members that we're supporting now with the current strategic partnerships. And the second, I think, dilemma is that we always, when we look at locally led development, localization, we put local organizations on the pedestal, and without even questioning how those local organizations has been conditioned so much on how aid has been channeled to them, that sometimes, channeling money is not enough. It's really about reflecting on how you could, also support each other to promote this trust-based relationship, and also be in a journey where you both take risk and also have an appetite to have the flexibility to also test other ways of, being in partnership. For example, our participatory grant making is really about, losing that control that funders always embrace and sort of preserve. And I think there should be a way to take risks and also, embrace this possibility of innovative transformation that could happen, and shifts away from doing development the same thing as how we've done it in the last 50 years.
That's a very clear call, Laurie. There are some interesting questions in the chat, and some of them are also directed to Mariska. Perhaps we can invite you to come in again. There has been a question from Eliana on how currently partners of the MFA are involved in the development of the guidance on equitable partnerships. Perhaps, Eliana, maybe it's better to give you a little bit of space to elaborate on that question and to ask it directly to Mariska.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mariska, for your sharing what MFA is doing on the localization agenda internally. I was wondering, because you mentioned, I think at the very end of your presentation, that you're developing a guidance internally. So I was wondering to what extent current partners are being involved in that, or how you're gathering inputs on experiences from all kinds of partners that MFA has. And then maybe the second question that I also included was more on, you mentioned an example on what you called support partners in one of, I think, another funding mechanism that you have, who channel through other organizations. I was wondering, are these organizations also allowed to have a part of an implementation role to say, or is it really only the fund management that they can do under this arrangement? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So this is why I hesitated a little bit to call it a guidance already. It's really a work in progress. And so at the moment, this is something that we are developing with the 9 partners under the Contributing to Peaceful and Safe Societies grant program, which is the one that I was directly involved with. The 9 partners that hold the contracts and their partners. And so we've had numerous conversations also with the in-country partners of these partners to understand exactly some of the very great points that were made by my colleagues in the panel. But what do they indicate in terms of what is important? And I think with that also we really urge them to focus on what lies within the span of control of us as a donor. So there are certain things that ultimately maybe we could think about, we can include more in a formal role, so we can put actually in a contract. At the moment, we're not there yet. So it's more in an informal, what is it that we can continue to focus on in our conversations with our partners? So it's things like very practical. Can you make sure that contracts that we have with, let's say, the pen holders, are they shared with everyone that is then subcontracted, so that organizations and actors themselves can see, are there extra requirements put forward that are not asked by the original donor? And if so, why is that the case? So that you can at least have a conversation on that. They urged us, make sure that in-country partners are involved in the regular dialogues that you have with your partners. So don't just talk with, so things like that. Can you make sure, they all said what we really need is the opportunity to also strengthen our institutional capacity. Very often something along the lines of capacity strengthening is involved in a lot of programs. But what is missing often is institutional capacity strengthening. So, make sure that there is also financial support to develop an institutional strategy to adjust certain methodologies or what have you not. And so all of this helps us for these sets of partnerships to come to results agreements with our partners, the ones that we hold a contract with, to basically say, and for me, the value is already that we make this part of the results agreements, meaning that we will be checking in on it, meaning that we also want our partners to reflect on how are you progressing on this. So you make it part of a conversation, sort of at the very least. And as I said, my personal, objective is then also to make sure that we as an MFA also engage with our partners, in this case INGOs, because of the structure of that grants framework, to also engage with them and their finance department and their legal department on what are how do we indeed, the points that were made by Laurie and Marije, absolutely right, in terms of, how do we balance compliance with partnership, and where is it what we are telling you is hindering you in really moving forward, but also, and I think that's an important point to make, to unpack maybe some of the assumptions that are in the minds of a lot of our partners in terms of what our system allows. Because very often there is an assumption that there is less room to maneuver than there actually is. And that's usually, filled and fed by a bad experience, if you will. So I fully understand where it's coming from, but this is a conversation that we need to have. So we need to put our finance people together with the finance people of our partners and hash it out, if you will, right? And so that we can also understand on our side, and for me that's very valuable, that they hear directly from our partners, this is actually where you are hindering for us to achieve this objective that we have set together in terms of, what we want to work towards. And that also then links a little bit to your second question in terms of the role of the support partners. And this is a framework that I was less involved in. So I'm this is what I understand of it. From what I understand, the focus is very much has been in the call for proposals on how are you going to fulfill your role as a support partner, with a focus indeed on making sure that you, how do you pass through money and how do you include your partners in the process of program design, monitoring, evaluation, etc., etc. And also, how are you going to support capacity strengthening processes again at the institutional level? It is very clearly not meant for that specific framework that the support partners also play a role, for instance, in advocacy or other type of activities. But it's new, and that's maybe then a final point to make in a more general reflection. Because fully agree, a lot of this is driven by risk aversion and the need for trying something new. Again, there I want to say there is, even in the current day and age, more possible than sometimes people assume, if you will. What we have done and what I've seen also in other grant policy frameworks is that you include also part of the budget really for piloting, for trying something new. You make it part of a learning agenda. As long as if you sort of, this is always my very simple term of sort of saying, if you say this is part of a learning process, then the result that is expected is that you have learned something. And that learning can be, well, this approach really doesn't work, but we have learned, and this is how we are going to take it forward. And I'm not saying, I'm not that naive to sort of think that in the current day and age, that is going to fly for the big chunk of the funding. But you can always, I think, include some of that in projects and programs, which actually I think is a good way to also push yourselves together with your partners to rethink some of these things that we are talking about.
All right. Thank you, Mariska, for these final reflections. I'm mindful of the time, and we have 3 minutes left to wrap up this session, which also means that we unfortunately need to bring this panel discussion to a close. But we do take in a lot of interesting reflections and calls to make efforts to change the way that we work with partnerships and include them or allow space for more leadership and local ownership of partners in these processes. I would also like to thank all the other contributors, and specifically Ines from ACFO, who gave the demonstration for the tool. In the chat, we will again post the link to the Power Awareness tool so that you can actually start using the tool yourself in the coming years, in the coming days, next year. We're really inviting you to actively use the tool, but also share with us how you've experienced it and how we might improve the tool, because we're not done yet. This is an ongoing process. And as a final call to action to you, and then we were planning to include this as a Mentimeter exercise, but we're just going to do this in the chat, because next year, Partos does want to continue to learn together with you on how we can work towards shifting power and long-lasting change within this sector. That having said, if you were the one to design a learning session, what are your learning needs? What are the type of topics that we should address in learning sessions that we want to create and organize with you next year to actually ensure that our efforts for shifting power and localization and decolonization are meaningful and addressing the type of conversations that we want to address. So please do share your reflections with us in the chat. And I also want to thank all the panelists that joined us today. So that's Mariska, Marij, and Lori. Thank you for your reflections. As we're listening and looking at the comments from the chat, you're also free to move on for the rest of your day. And I wish you a wonderful holiday season. Take good care. It's been a very turbulent and dynamic year for most of us, mostly. So this is the moment for us to recharge, and we'll come back full power next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gigi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.